do you think that some of the teachers within those institutions are some of the problem, in that they have trained a particular way, be it some form of not the true master apprentice model, but a form of, this is how I was trained and this is how I'm going to train you? Do you feel that some of those teachers perhaps are stuck in that, this is what I know and this is what I'm going to teach you?
Oh, see,
And
now you're fully cocking the gun that you
oh,
loaded. I just want to call it out for your listeners. Like you have totally, like, and you may have fired a warning shot. No, I'm totally.
oh.
Um, I mean, yes, is my answer. If
That's
I'm being
okay.
honest,
You're
like,
allowed to say yes on my show. You don't get
yeah.
fired from my show.
No, and I don't. I mean, I have to say, I think that I frankly do not find that to be true of the place where I teach. But
Yes, likewise.
and we're very fortunate in that.
We are. We are.
Sincerely, I will say that I think that tenure is a wonderful thing, and I think it's a very dangerous thing. And I think there needs to be a competition of ideas in academia, and I think that there needs to be some sort of way where we all hold ourselves to a standard where we are fully investigating what is happening right now,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not
Mm-hmm.
10 years ago
Mm-hmm.
when we, may have been in the field, or 20 years ago or whatever it may be. Like, how are we keeping, and that's the scholarship portion of it, right? It's like, how are we keeping our scholarship alive so we're bringing the best to our students? And are we so bent, bringing it back around, are we so bent on teaching a method that we're not willing to teach the student,
Mm.
right?
Yes, yes. And talking about safe spaces, I did like a little reel once again. I've been putting myself out there, and yeah, I've been loading the gun in some of
Good.
the comments I've been making, because I feel I'm in a place of privilege because of the program that I'm working in,
Sure.
and I am advocating for change within our singing voice community in terms of CCM. I am a CCM advocate. That has been my career for over 45 years, as a performer, as a teacher, as an academic, now an author, a researcher, whatever you want to call it. And one of the things that I believe, if you're going to create safe spaces for our students in academia or otherwise, one, we have to listen to our students. Secondly, and this probably needs to be up top, we need to leave our biases at the door. And that includes music preferences.
Mm-hmm.
That includes music preferences. And one of the areas that academia is stuck in is still continuing to endorse a Western European model from the 16th century that does not equip students for the sounds that they have to create in current music markets.
Mm-hmm.
There is a big problem there in higher education, but it's not about that. This discussion is not about that. But in terms of music theatre, do you think there are greater advancements in that area than, I know that there's very little with CCM still.
Spin that out just a little bit more for me.
Okay,
Advancements in what in particular?
okay, that they're starting to create and encourage music theatre programs within higher education, and putting together programs that actually will make students employable and not based from a classical. They don't say, "Oh, come and have classical training and then you can become a musical
Ah,
theatre singer."
yeah, I see what you're saying. Um, yeah, I mean, there are trillions of them. in the States. I mean, it's musical theater could not be a more competitive uh, program to try to enter into as a freshman undergraduate in the United States. I think it's probably one of the most competitive as far as I know. And so, yeah, and I do think that there is, um, uh, again, from kind of my vantage point, I do think that there are a lot of programs that are looking at um, musical theater as its own kind of pedagogy, right?
Yay!
Yeah, this make it.
You get
This is
another
something that we're.
clap.
Yeah,
That's another clap. No, no, no,
yeah,
because I feel that it should have its own pedagogy. It's its own
yeah.
unique art form, and it should be respected in that way.
Well, when you're performing, I mean, when you're performing 8 shows a week, you better have, you know, I talk to my students all the time. I was like, you have to have an 8 show a week technique. That
Hmm.
is,
Hmm.
that's the gold standard. Like you want to
Yes,
work,
yes,
that's what you have to have. And
yes.
and this is especially true as, in contemporary musical theater, which I really love, it's starting to rely much more heavily on pop rock music. And there's a lot more demand on the singers as a result. And so I think as a result of all of that, starting in definitely in the late 80s, early 90s, and certainly now, there's definitely a pedagogical view that has emerged and continues to evolve, which I think is great. Um, I feel like the same is true, if I may, for CCM. You had mentioned earlier, before we started, you had mentioned talking about Elizabeth Benson, and
Yes.
she wrote the wonderful book Training Contemporary Commercial Singers, and I'm just finishing it. I have to say, to me, it is the most cogent examination of CCM pedagogical approaches. I think
Mhm.
it's just it's such a great book because it literally takes, is it 10 or 12 different CCM pedagogues and kind of brings them all together and say, all right, how do you feel about vowels? How do you feel about how breath is used? How do you talk about registers? How do you talk about, artistry? All of
Mm.
these different things. And so I think that that's happening too, which is very heartening to me. Having said all this, I feel like this kind of is similar to what I said earlier, but I feel like it bears repeating. I think it's essential that we celebrate all styles of singing through performance and research, and that, as I said earlier, we we love our labels. We have come to love our labels
Yes.
as musicians, and some of those labels are really they limit us and they limit our pedagogical scope, I think. And so I hope that we can continue to learn from each other. And because I believe that when we do, because I believe that there's so much more that brings us together. I mean, it's all the same instrument. Yes, it may be used differently in classical and musical theater and CCM or popular music styles. It may be used differently, but it's the same instrument. And there's a lot more in common than not. And
Hmm.
so I celebrate the different pedagogies, and I say let's just continue to learn. Like, oh, this is how you talk about this. Oh, I wonder if I can bring that into my studio, even though I teach in a different kind of genre of music. Does that make
Yes,
sense?
absolutely. And we had this discussion in the pre-interview meeting where I said, well, one thing, irrespective of style, good singing is good singing. And by that I meant efficient, sustainable singing.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I love that you use that word sustainable. I I talk to my students and like I'm not interested in what some may call good or bad sound. That is wholly subjective. Um, and there's sometimes where
absolutely. And that's
there's
bias
times
too.
it's bias exactly,
Yes.
and on so many levels, and and it can be used as a way of gatekeeping. I mean, it's so problematic. Um, it's also we don't always want to make quote unquote beautiful sounds, depending on
No.
what we're expressing. Now, Do we want to make sustainable sounds, efficient sounds? Yes, we do. And do we want to know if what we're doing is inefficient or unsustainable? Yes, we do.
Mm.
But the spectrum in between those two things is so vast. And I think we have such a great opportunity to encourage our students, regardless of what genre they're singing in, to explore that spectrum. That's what's interesting to me.
Yes. And when you say not all those sounds are beautiful, it's actually okay to have imperfections in voice, because that could be a moment of true vulnerability, a moment of being honest. And
Yeah,
it's then you being authentic, and your imperfections are what makes you unique as an artist.
absolutely. I talk to my students about, you know, when you're walking the street and you see people stopped around, a busker singing, accompanying themselves on the guitar, or you know, or people going to church or going to the theater, to watch a musical or an opera or whatever it is. I believe that I believe that people are going and paying attention to these performers because there's something in what we do as singers that is so risky, that is so daring.
Hmm.
And I think people, probably most of them completely unconsciously, are so drawn to that because they want to be that brave themselves. That's, I think, why we go to the theater. We want to watch people be braver than we feel like we can be. And
Mm.
that's why we're rooting for the person that that starts out rags to riches, whatever the story is, right? Whatever the story is being told, we're rooting for that person because that's us. That's us,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And so
yes.
we're not looking for perfection. We're looking for
No,
honest. We're
no,
looking for authentic, right?
yes, yes. I drill that into my students from the first day. Well, I shouldn't say drill. I allow that space
Sure.
in my voice studio where they can have those moments where things may not go as planned. Sometimes they may, have, but I want them to experiment and to play. And I don't know if you know Heidi Moss, but
Mm.
Heidi is a scientist and voice teacher and a singer. And she talks about having failed science experiments. And I love this, that you're allowed to have failed experiments in the science laboratory. And I take it a step further and I say, well, people are, every day there's people like researchers trying to find a cure for cancer. How many failures do they have
Mm.
every day? Why can't you allow yourself, what you perceive to be a failure, something that may not work out the way you want it? And the difference is no one's life is at risk.
Right.
So
Right.
it's okay. This is so for you. I know it's a big thing for you to create that safe space for your students to be, or you call it a safer space, and you can explain that for your students to become vulnerable. How do you do that?
Yeah. I This summer I've kind of had an evolution of safe to safer spaces, and what has come to me is that I'm only one person in the space, right?
Mhm.
So I can create the space and say, "Hey, this is safe space," but that means that in some ways defining the space for somebody else, right? And so I'm working on just playing with the idea of like creating safer space and to invite in the uncomfortable. And so for me, what that looks like is, as you said, is or earlier you said investigating our own biases, which I think is
Oh,
so important.
absolutely. And to
Um,
check in on them regularly too.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. I think that we have to also have an awareness of our our own our own internal life. Um, where are those moments where we may be reactionary, or respond to a student in a way that maybe is not the most helpful to them in that moment? And um, I've been thinking about this a lot. Uh, if I may just go on this tangent for a second, Marissa, that
Yes, that's
I,
absolutely fine, as long as you're okay.
yeah, totally
Yeah.
good.
Can you hold? Sorry, I just realized I need to put power. We're just going to pause this for a second while you gather your
Sure,
thoughts. Is that okay?
totally fine.
Thank you. That's better. By the way, too, I know we're going over. Are you okay?
I'm okay as long as you are.
I'm loving this.
Me too.
It just
Good.
feels like we're having a great chat. I
Exactly.
apologize for the loaded guns.
No,
No,
no, no.
no.
I say that totally with joking.
And can I say sorry, but not sorry?
Yes, you can. Of
All right.
course.
Okay. So back to your response.
So I just, as I said earlier, finished my first week of teaching at NYU. And on Friday, I had this realization that it was the first time that I can remember as a teacher finishing the first week of a semester that I wasn't utterly exhausted. I taught 7 hours one day. I felt like I could have taught another five. I got through the entire week. I think I probably taught about 20 hours in the week
Mhm.
on top of doing other stuff. And I wasn't tired at all. And one of the things that came to me was, I'm someone who, probably not surprising, based on what I've shared about myself thus far, I struggle with anxiety, and kind of
I'm
coping
hearing
with,
you. I'm
yeah,
hearing you.
you know, um, I used to wake up with kind of this heaviness in my chest almost every day.
Oh.
And I have to say, since this past May, I haven't. And and then I was like, you got through this week and you feel completely fine and you're ready to, to do it again. And I think that what came to me was that, because I'm not weighed down by my own stress and which causes a lot of different things, I'm
Yes.
then not a magnet for everyone else's stuff, right?
Hmm.
And I think what I did, and this is just a hypothesis, it's very new, but I think what
Yes.
I did was I kind of, allowed everyone else's stuff to come on to me and then pulled it along through the week until I got so exhausted I had to sleep. And I think I'm in a different place now. And so to go back to your question about safer spaces, I think it's stewardship. It's our own self-care. How are we caring for ourselves? I know that in order to keep my anxiety at bay, I have to do physical exercise. That means for me running and lifting weights. That's how I do that.
Hmm.
I have to meditate daily. I'm doing a wonderful Deepak Chopra 21-day abundance meditation that
I've
I highly
done that one.
recommend.
I've
Oh, I
done
love
it.
it. So, so
I
great.
love it.
And it also means that I journal, just so I can kind of, as I call it, kind of keep the lava flow low. Because we don't want to be reactionary in the studio when a student does something that and we've had nine other things that have happened earlier in that day that have made us anxious or upset or frustrated, and then we lash out at the student. Well, we have now ruined that creative that safer space, right? And
Hmm.
so I think that has a large part to do with it. um,
Can I just
and
pop in just for a
yeah,
moment? I don't
please.
don't want to interrupt your train of thought, but we are definitely kindred spirits. I do all
Yes, we
three
are.
of those every day, and I have to too for exactly the same reason
Mm.
that you're describing. So I just wanted to share that, even for our listeners to know that if they're struggling, if they're finding they don't have the energy or the mentality, or they're not showing up as best as they possibly can on that day, because every day is different and our best is different on a daily basis, have a think about these, incorporating some of these practices into your day, and it can really be life changing.
And I also want to add, if I may, that I do not do this perfectly. I will be the first one to
Oh,
tell you that I still have days where I do feel like I was a little reactionary in
mm-hmm,
in that moment, and I can catch it faster because
mm-hmm.
I'm hopefully a little bit more on an even ground than I would be otherwise. But
But you're human.
yeah, I'm human, and we get to, I love this phrase, let's learn how to fail better, right? How do we fail better every day in our work as teachers? Um, and so the other thing I would say is, how do we foster this this feeling of excitement and around um, being curious, getting our students to be curious about what they're doing and finding joy in what they're doing? Because I think that, you know, if we do not do these things in the studio, it doesn't matter how gifted we are as pedagogues. It really doesn't, because the
Mm,
knowledge is not going to go in.
mm-hmm,
The seeds are going to fall on rock and
mm-hmm,
not on fertile soil.
mm-hmm.
And so, so again, I can hear part of me in my head going, "Oh God, he's so woo woo," you know, like,
Well,
but
you know what? We can woo woo together.
it's, as I said earlier, it's a combination of these things. It's not just intuition and ignoring science. It's not just, fostering curiosity and passion and and not teaching. It's all of this together. And I think that what I want to never do is to use my knowledge as a barrier between myself and the student. And I think that's what creating safer spaces does. And I think that what we can do, and I think that that's how we can actually uh, extend allyship to our students.
Mm. It's to some of what you're describing, what I'm feeling, or a way that I'm wanting to articulate is, we can't go into our studios with limiting beliefs. If we have limiting beliefs of what the voice can do, what the student is capable of, that's once again, I suppose, a bias.
Yeah,
Then the student is not going to grow. So we're not creating an environment for growth and exploration if we as teachers go in with these limited beliefs and expectations.
that's exactly right. And I think that part of stewardship that I just want to add
Mm,
is setting healthy boundaries too, right? Because
yes.
if we do not set boundaries around the work we do with our students, that creates many problems. And we're also not focusing their energy to help them grow, right? So
Mm,
it's not just all of this or all of that. It's a combination of all of these things, to the benefit of the student.
mm. Is there anything else that you wanted to say in terms of that, holding safer spaces? You've touched on mindfulness and self-care for you. Was there something that you wanted to say in terms of how that impacts your teaching, or do you encourage your students to do any of that work themselves?
Uh, yes, I mean, I think that the first thing that comes to me is that, my job as a teacher is to give my students permission to both learn and trust their individuality.
Mm, mm-hmm.
That's my
Yes.
philosophy. It's
Yes.
like I, I have lots of different ways to get in where you want to go, but like that's what all of this is about. It's my giving you permission to be who you are,
Mm,
right?
mm-hmm.
Not who you think you should be, but who
Mm.
you actually are.
Your students are very lucky to have you.
That's very kind.
I
I
love
feel
how you
very
think.
fortunate.
Yeah, I love how you think.
Thank you.
I wish others in our field thought the same way or even were remotely open to some of the ideas that you're talking about. I think we all need to. ICVT was a great start, and I think we
Yeah.
all need to start jumping on the bandwagon. It's time for change.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm very, um, I see it happening, um, uh, uh, and I think it has a lot to do with, we're getting um, people who have lived experiences that are different than mine, that are, bringing all of who they are into the studio, and that's what we need each teacher to do,
Mm.
is to do that, because I think that's what liberates the student. I think it's, yeah, so important.
Yes, and you do work as an activist too. You may not call yourself that, but when I read your blogs, you you have beliefs, you write about things that you believe that are important. What are some of those things that you would like to see change in within our singing voice community that perhaps we haven't touched on so far?
Yeah, you are correct. I wouldn't call myself an activist. I maybe
I do.
I'll call myself a, thank you. I'll call myself a concerned citizen.
Oh,
Um,
that's
in
a very polite term.
in terms of what I would love to see, I would love to see. Um, so I'm going to talk kind of a couple different things at a couple different levels. The first thing I would say, specific to my area, in musical theaters, I want to see an update in casting practices at the university level. And I'm just going to tease that out for a second.
Sure.
For years, we have cast people by type. The ingenue, the funny best friend, the leading man, right? And a lot of these types, archetypes, I'll call them, came to us even before they predate the Commedia dell'arte, and so that's how, that we have kind of these stock characters. That's how Golden Age kind of started. These kind of stock characters. You got your funny best friend. You got the ingenue and the male lead who's she's gonna fall in love with him. And the problem with these these archetypes is that they have been used as a form of gatekeeping. They have kept white cisgender people at the center of musical theater for a very, very long time. And so there needs to be a shift, and there is happening in the industry, starting to at least, a shift to essence. Essence is basically, what are the 6 to 8 adjectives you would use to describe yourself? And they can be lots of different things, because you are many different things. I love
Mm.
Walt Whitman's, I contain multitudes, right? And so getting to help students kind of create their own agency, to have a sense of, like, what is my essence as a performer? Yes, I may be funny, but I can also do this. And they're not vocal technical things. They're just like who you are as a human being.
Yes.
And then looking at it from that perspective, I also think, related to that, I think that students should be able to tell, um, those who are casting them in productions, who they feel they are in the world of a show, regardless of gender, regardless of the identity of the character. Why don't we start again from their point of view? It may not be where the production lands, but at least we're allowing the students to claim their agency, and I think in a really powerful way. So that's the first one.
Hmm.
Um, I want to support, and create more visibility for trans non-binary performers, creatives, and teachers. There's so much work that needs to be done in this
Absolutely.
area, that would be a whole other hour among itself. And then I think there needs to be more equity in full-time and adjunct faculty so that the faculty better represent the community that they serve. Um, and then finally, my wish for us as a teaching community is, and again, this I'll claim this as maybe my own stuff, but and my own kind of imposter syndrome rearing its head. But I do feel like there's a lot of shame around not knowing things, and
Oh, yes. Oh, I have suffered from imposter syndrome too. Like, mm,
yeah, and I
mm,
think that I just want to share for your listeners this quote I've used quite a bit. But Michael Smithson, who's a social scientist at Australian National University, he uses this great analogy to explain the relationship between knowledge and ignorance. And this is the quote. It's from a New York Times article back in the 1980s. He said, "The larger the island of knowledge grows, the longer the shoreline where knowledge meets ignorance extends. The more we know, the more we can ask. Questions don't give way to answers as much as they proliferate together. Answers breed questions. Curiosity isn't merely a static disposition, but rather a passion of the mind that is ceaselessly earned and nurtured." And I
incredible.
think those are words to live by. And I think that I feel I'll claim it on your show. I feel shame for not understanding acoustics
Oh,
in the way that I want
oh,
to. Right?
oh,
I
don't get
feel
me. Yes.
and I think it's I was having this conversation with one of my teacher colleagues who's just so fantastic. It's also okay to kind of know your lane and know,
Yes,
like, I'm not,
exactly.
I'm a good teacher, but I'm not a voice scientist, and I'm not supposed to be. There are other
Mm,
people that do that
mm,
brilliantly. God
mm.
bless Kenneth Bozeman. Oh my gosh, I love that man. I think he's so brilliant in what he's
Yes,
created and what he's done
yes,
for our community. It's
yes.
amazing. Ingo Titsa, so many great pedagogues who are really filling our brains with such great voice science knowledge. That's not who I am. That's never going to be who I am, and that's not a bad on me. It's not. It
And it
doesn't.
doesn't make you a bad teacher because
No.
you have amazing qualities that other teachers don't have. Ones that you've just articulated to me, I feel they're far better. I would rather not not know anything about voice science and acoustics, but be a wonderful, caring, knowledgeable teacher that students grow and they become beautiful singers and have amazing careers, sustainable voices without that stuff too.
Totally. Totally. And again, there's room for all of that. There's room for
Yes,
all.
there
And
is.
I guess that's the thing that I want to hit home is that there's there's room for all of us at the table.
Mm,
And regardless of what our focus is, there's room for everyone at the table. And so if we can create that um, and celebrate those intersections that
mm.
we do find where we do have a lot more in common than we thought. I think that's what's going to make our community stronger. So
Yes,
I guess that's
yes.
kind of my dream for you know
Well,
for our
maybe we can
community.
extend safe space to incorporate not only all students to be heard, but all teachers to be invited and to be
Please.
accepted. Maybe that's what we need to now start endorsing that as well.
Yeah.
Allow all teachers, no matter of their skill set, of the styles that they teach, their backgrounds, that they are all invited to our community and be a part of that community and enjoy the sharing of one another.
Yeah. Totally. Totally right.
Now we have been on here for so long. I think, David, we're going to, this is definitely 2 episodes here, which, thank
Okay.
you, I've just got 2 episodes out of you. Just for having this beautiful chat with you. Now, with all the roles that you take on your multi-hyphenate career, which is a wonderful word. You've introduced me to that word. What are you doing right now? Where are you at with everything right now?
Um, so I'll give you kind of a snapshot of the week to come.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm writing an introduction for this new book that I'm working on while outlining the table of contents. And just very briefly, I'll say that the working title is Wholehearted Teaching, um, bringing together body, mind, and spirit in the voice studio.
I'll be
And
buying that book.
oh, it's very nice. It's there are a lot of really great books about um, the pedagogical information, and I'm interested in okay, then how do we communicate that information
Mm.
in the studio, and how do we recognize that there has been tremendous change in how we learned versus how today's student learns. Um, sports, we look at like sports psychology and what's happening in the mindfulness, um, all the research that's coming out of mindfulness and psychology, and how can we bring all of that to our benefit in the voice studio? So that's it's kind of a big topic that's wholly scaring me, but I'm gonna give it a go. I'm working on a new concept musical as a composer that's loosely based on the life of Leonardo da Vinci. And
Oh, wow. Can I
and
say
what it's
wow? I
yeah,
went I
sure.
went I went to the Leonardo da Vinci Museum in Rome just before
Oh, amazing.
ICVT. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What a man.
What an amazing life. And really what the show is about genius and
Oh,
how we are so attracted to genius and
mhm.
how we want to feel as if some small part of that is ours, um,
Mm.
or that we can use it to get where we need to go, maybe in a more malevolent way. And so I'm with a colleague of mine. I'm creating this new musical about various people throughout time who have either lifted up Da Vinci's work um, to for the benefit of humankind, or have lifted up Da Vinci's work for their own benefit.
Ah,
And so I'm very interested about
interesting.
that.
How are you
Yeah.
researching that?
Well, we just finished this really. I'm not going to remember the name of the author, and I apologize. But there's an
Okay, so it's a book.
incredible yeah, autobiography on Da Vinci that we read, and then my colleague Lynn and I are working to do our own research based on the characters that we're kind of creating together. So a lot of the research phase right now, and kind of the scene writing phase of that. So working on that a little bit. I'm launching with Laura again. Laura Josepher and I wrote this book called Mastering College Musical Theater Auditions,
Hmm.
which is what it sounds like. It's helping high school students prepare for the realities of the audition season, college audition season. There's so many different parts of that process, and there are not a lot of really detailed books about that process. And our book in particular has sections for the student, teacher, and the parent to read. And I'm proud to say that this week we're launching the third edition of the book,
That's excellent.
which has a whole online companion so we can continue to grow and evolve the information we share. So we're doing that, and then I'm putting together an album of songs from a series I created with my longtime collaborator Tom Gualtieri called "Draw the Circle Wide," and it ties in to this diversity, equity, inclusion exercise. Not exercise, discussion rather, that we've been having about our industry. We interviewed different professional performers in the musical theater industry about their experience of being othered in the industry, and then we created a song specifically for them to put them in the center of their own story. That working on that, and then I'm reshaping a review of some songs called Variations on the Theme of You, and then teaching, teaching, teaching. So that's this week.
As I asked you before, how do you sleep? But you actually answered that question. Do you find, though, that you need to be doing a number of things? Is that what fills your soul?
Oh, 100%. And if you would ask me, what is the most important, it's the answer is what I'm currently working on at that moment.
Okay, so you're focused. To me, I just hear, okay, whatever it is working on has to take priority
Yeah,
right now.
exactly right.
Yeah, and just step into that role. So we've kind of answered the last two questions that I was going to ask you. What do you believe that we can all do better as a singing voice community? Is there anything further you wanted to add to that?
Um, yeah, let me. I think very. I've answered very long form in your show,
Hmm.
and you've been very kind to let me do so. So thank you.
Oh, it's been
Um,
a joy. No, thank you.
so I'll keep this very succinct and just say, listen and stay curious. That's our job. If I had to summarize it into one sentence, that's what it is.
Hmm. So I think we've covered off on everything.
We did it. That's really
We did
impressive.
it. I mean, that was just brilliant. I could sit here and talk to you all day. I just love the way you think and your philosophies and your attitude to
Thank you.
everything and your openness, and that you were so willing to share all these parts of you as well, that I you know, it's up to the guest how much they want to reveal about themselves, and you were totally open, and I think it's a privilege to be in this space with you, so thank you.
Thank you, Marissa. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you, and I just think so highly of you. And I
Oh,
knew this was going to be a great conversation. So,
yes.
so thank you for making time
And
to have it.
we're going to share all your links to
Hmm.
your books, your work, whatever it is you would like our listeners to discover more about, or if they want to purchase any of your books or music, we will share all that in the show notes for you. It's the least
Awesome.
we can do is to promote you even further, but just putting it out there, this is definitely going to be a part one and a part two episode.
Well, the other thing that I want to say to listeners is, I mean, yes, should you feel called by my books, that's great. But, if there's something about the conversation that we've been having today, as you've been listening, that really resonates with you, that you want to talk about, I hope that you'll reach out to us,
Oh,
because,
absolutely.
there's nothing that makes me happier than to kind of um, meet more of my people. you know,
Mm,
who people that are really willing to kind of go deep into these conversations and to learn from each other. So please, my all of my contact information is on my website, just davidsisco.com.
mm,
And so please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to chat with you.
mm. Thing is with you, David, you care.
Oh gosh, we have to.
You do.
What's
You
the point?
and that comes across. You're very passionate and you care about what you're doing and about the people that you teach, you surround yourself with. It's a credit to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
And
so
it's
much.
not just about notches on the belt. It's like, oh, I have, so many students. It's not a brag. It's these are humans. These are people that I care about. I have this responsibility and I'm going to do my best with them.
I believe we all get to go up the ladder together, wherever we are on our ladders, and so yeah, let's like first of all let's level the playing field, as we're doing as we're talking about as we've talked about today, and yeah, let's kind of just all learn from each other.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to let you go because you've given way, way so much time. Really appreciate you. Love your work. Love you. And I'm sure our paths are going to connect. Well, I have an invitation to your guest room in New York. So,
You do.
and you better show me all the shops.
You know I will. And Albert, my husband, and I love Australia. We just have loved our time there, and we
That's
will
where we
definitely get
met.
back.
Yes,
Yes.
well, I have a guest room,
Oh,
and I live
okay.
on the
You heard
Gold
it here
Coast.
first, Australia.
I know. Now we're both committed.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah,
That's very balanced. That's good.
it is. Well, take it easy. Wish you all the best, and yeah, we'll connect soon. Take care.
You
Thank
you
you.
bet. Take care.
Bye,
Bye bye.
David.